Welcome to another episode of Intelligence Conversations. Today, Neil Bisson, Director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, sits down with Ryan Zorn, Head of Cyber Analysis Group and a former Canadian Security Intelligence Service officer, to discuss the vital role of open source intelligence, OSINT, in national security and corporate defense. Neil and Ryan explore how OSINT enhances national policing investigations and why private companies must incorporate it into their threat assessments to protect intellectual property, safeguard executives, and defend corporate reputations. They also discuss the growing concern over misinformation and disinformation in both the public and private sectors, and what organizations can do when faced with these threats. The conversation also takes a critical look at the rise of DeepSeek, a controversial AI-driven OSINT tool. Ryan and Neil break down the risks it poses and the potential security vulnerabilities it introduces. Stay tuned for a fascinating discussion on the power and the pitfalls of OSINT in today's rapidly evolving intelligence landscape.
Welcome back, everybody, to Intelligence Conversations. I'm Neil Bisson, the Director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, and I have the great pleasure of having a former colleague of mine, Ryan Zorn, coming on, and he is the guy in charge of a company called CyberAGroup, and he's going to be talking to us today about OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence Collection. And I was lucky enough to have a conversation with Ryan just recently on the other podcast that I do called Spies Like Us with Al Tredenick and Phil Gursky, and he gave us a great rundown on AI and some of the concerns that we have about it going forward. But I wanted to have Ryan on my show because I wanted him to give us a rundown about OSINT, which I would say is something that's been around for a while, but not necessarily what a lot of people look at as the ability to collect enough information that is readily available to anyone, and how valuable that can be in investigations that are either national security or law enforcement. So Ryan's here to give us a rundown on all that. Ryan, thanks for coming. Thanks for being a part of the Intelligence Conversations.
Hey, Neil, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with basically giving you an opportunity to kind of tell our listeners what your background is in national security and kind of how you transited from being where you were with the National Security Program for Canada, who you worked with, to what you're doing now. So maybe you can jump in and let us know what that's all about.
Sure, Neil, thanks. Well, like you, Neil, I was an IO, an intelligence officer, so, we were expected to be the jack of all trades.
Master of none.
Master of none.
Right.
I did have a little bit of tech background and was a little more tech savvy, which isn't saying much compared to my colleagues at the time, and of course my bosses, who were all former Mounties. So when I joined the service, I don't know if it was the same when you joined, but we had to submit a paper with our application.
Right.
And the paper I submitted was how we should be using the internet to help agencies like CSIS to do intelligence collection, how important that was. And of course, back then, I'm dating myself now, the internet had just become graphical. It was before that basically a bulletin board system with the dial-up, the dial-up modems that screeched and and you waited half an hour for anything to load.
There you go.
But even back then, I kind of realized coming in that it probably something we should pay attention to, and certainly I learned throughout my career that not only is something we pay attention to, but it's become a key investigative tool for investigative agencies like CSIS, like the Mounties.
So it sounds like not only were you ahead of your time, but you were spot on. I mean, nowadays, I don't think most people would be able to function if it wasn't for an opportunity to have access to the internet, and whether it's a social media profile or how they get their news or how they communicate with other people. I mean, it's basically become ubiquitous. It's everywhere, and everyone's using it all the time.
Well, it's almost too much now, and that's one of the issues and one of the problems, and of course OSINT. One of the challenges that we have doing OSINT, both in an investigative agency, but in a company like mine, and we'll get into that maybe a little bit later. Just to give you a little more background, I was fortunate as an IO to be involved in some early investigations that involved an extremist group in particular who was jumped right quick on the internet as a tool propaganda, for
Right.
recruitment, for fundraising. And then I built a bit of a reputation as a technical IO, I guess you could say, and was spun into some of our more, our earliest cyber espionage investigations. So I was
Okay.
very lucky to be exposed to that kind of stuff early.
Mhm.
Of course, with IOs, you always have to be dragged back to headquarters, and so I was dragged back to the
Everyone's
big
got to go to
house.
the mothership so they can
You
get
got to
their
go to the big house.
reprogramming. That's right.
So back to the big house I went, and actually, although the service, we were looking at these types of threats, but the real spark for a dedicated OSINT unit came after I took a course from the RCMP.
Oh, okay.
So I'll give kudos to them. I took a course, and of course, OSINT wasn't really a term that was used back then, but they were doing a course on how the internet can support their investigations.
Okay.
And for me, it was an eye opener. I said, wow, this is incredible. We need to be doing this. We need to be doing this in a dedicated way. Again, we were doing it broken up into the different areas and different desks that we had, but I said, this is something that we really need to focus on. So I gathered a lot of smart people around me, much smarter than me.
Always a smart thing to do.
Yeah, and had some bosses who gave me a long leash or maybe didn't quite realize what we were doing.
Right.
And we created the first OSINT unit. And early on, we saw amazing success, initially just supporting current operations.
Okay.
As you know, especially back then, the service was very human is the only intelligence. It's the most important intelligence.
Right.
And really anything else kind of, not really useful. That was the thinking at the time. So, but we were able to disprove that really quickly, and not only turbocharge some of those early investigations, but eventually the OSINT unit was actually generating the leads, was actually finding the investigations.
Well, that's impressive.
Actually, absolutely. So, and from that, I ended up spinning off a cyber threat unit specific to cyber threats. And then as an IO, I got the IO itch and went overseas and did some IO things there.
There you go.
And then got dragged back into headquarters, as we always do. They brought me into at the time, our big data exploitation area. I remember the day I started, it was the day, I think the headline in the Globe and Mail was "CSIS bulk data collection illegal." So,
what a great first day to start.
Welcome back, Ryan. Here you go. Deal with it. But for me, it was a good learning tool. I learned a lot about privacy issues and compliance and all that good stuff. And then shortly after that, I retired with 28 years. So I did my time. But we joined the service to serve.
Right.
And for me, there was a pull. It sounds sappy to say, but there really was a pull to serve again. And I thought, well, the best way I can do that is by doing what I really loved in the service, which was creating that OSINT unit. So I've done that in the private sector. I was lucky enough to have a lot of the people that were around me at the time in the service have now also moved out into the private sector. And so I have a network of these people that, like I say, this is what we do. So,
Yeah, it's interesting that you had mentioned that, because even myself, like when I retired, at first it was just kind of the joy of no longer, having a 9 to 5 kind of situation, but it really does become a part of your life when it comes to intelligence. And in my own way, when I do the Global Intelligence Weekly wrap up, or I have Spies Like Us, or even Intelligence Conversations, one of the main things that I'm trying to do is to get this information out there so that people have a better understanding of what intelligence is all about, how national security in Canada is an important factor in their lives. And it goes back to what you were saying about how you just kind of don't ever get away from that. I think it's more, as corny as it sounds, it is a calling, and you just kind of still do a little bit of what you did before. So it's great to hear that you're still involved in that kind of stuff. For our listeners, maybe you can give us a little bit of a rundown of what you're doing now. So you're working in you've got a company, your own company, that's called CyberAGroup. So, and it does focus mainly on OSINT. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do with them.
Sure. I guess maybe I'll take a quick step backwards and just kind of explain what we consider OSINT, or what OSINT means to us now out in the private sector. So for a lot of folks, you just think of open source information from the internet as being Google, right? Uh,
Everybody goes to Google.
that's right. Well, I can Google it, so why would I look to a third party to do that? Or why would our company invest in an internal OSINT team? Well, Google and other search engines that index information on the internet, they only really capture a really small fraction of what's actually out there.
Right.
And they don't do a real good job of capturing, open information from things like social media, and the media and the material you are seeing, especially these days, is now basically jam-packed with misinformation and disinformation.
Right,
So,
which is something that was mentioned just recently from the Hogue report, right? Like, and we're seeing
absolutely.
it more and more and more. Is that not only is it one of those things that's being used for foreign interference, but it's also just something that's out there. If you're a private company and you work as an executive, or your company is basically being named and maybe misinformation or disinformation is being said about that company, I'm assuming that's something that you're going to want to know about.
Absolutely. And of course, there's a lot more to the internet these days, especially with things like the dark web.
Hmm.
A place that's deliberately secretive, and anonymous.
Hmm.
That's now spurning a lot of these, especially threat-related things that we're chasing.
Right.
It's a harbor for illegality, but also for threats, and something that companies in the private sector needs to be aware of.
Right.
So I get that question a lot. Why would a third party like CyberAGroup, why should a company hire us? Why should, whether you're a small business or a corporation, where's the value? So
Hmm.
it there's a long answer, and I won't get into it here. But I have done a paper, and so I would invite your listeners to go
Check that
to.
out.
That's right, our website, and it's actually on my LinkedIn page. So
Okay.
if you get to my LinkedIn page, there's a link off the website, cyberagroup.com.
Hmm.
I get into some more details about why a third party uh, organization like CyberAGroup is of value in looking at this stuff.
Hmm.
Just as an example. So yesterday I spent the morning looking at, for a user on porn sites, in the afternoon looking at beheading videos. So,
Oh, yeah.
as a private sector company, you've got to ask yourself, well, do I really want, my employees doing this kind of thing?
Right.
So there is room and a real place for third party organizations like CyberAGroup to kind of fill that gap. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, uh, that Bob down in your IT department who's good at Google,
Hmm.
certainly you might want to reconsider using him to do some of what's now become really a requirement for most businesses.
Right.
OSINT to me is as essential as having your IT department look at your security firewall
Right.
to monitor that. So uh, the flip side of using a third party like CyberAGroup is obviously you need to trust and have a lot of trust in that third party,
Right.
and so of course that's where we bring that culture from the service, that discretion, the
Hmm.
security,
Hmm.
confidentiality, and we bring that over with us, and it serves us well in the private sector.
You bring up a really good point, Ryan. I mean, one of the things that you have to be concerned about if you own your own business, whether it be a corporation or even just, something that's got less than 10 people working for you, if you're going to have someone like yourself take a look at this kind of stuff, you might want to think about having a third company do it, just so that you're not basically putting your own employees in a position where, what if there is compromise with one of these individuals, And by basically going to a company like yourself, you're taking that, not only that responsibility off of them, but you can also say to yourself that I don't have to worry about the potential compromise coming from the individual that I just asked to do these searches with. And you're also getting someone like yourself who's got basically decades of experience and they know where to look, as opposed to, as you said, a guy who's got a great IT background and he could probably set up a server at any time, like no time flat. But, he gets on Google and he's like, okay, well, I did a check and we're good.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've talked to some big corporations where I say, listen, they say, well, we've got our own internal OSINT group. And I said, well, that's great. But so they're protecting your C-suite. Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I said, well, do you realize that, you've got employees
Hmm.
looking at, threats against your C-suite, but they're also going to trip on some perhaps private, sensitive information. Do you really
Right.
want employees doing that?
Right.
Again, a trusted third party might be a solution in that particular instance. Uh,
Exactly.
uh, but again, I get into some of this detail. Check out that paper on my LinkedIn page.
Yeah. Well, for our
Uh,
listeners, I'll make sure that that link is added to the show notes so that they can get an opportunity to check that out. Now, while we're talking, Ryan, I wanted to bring up one other thing. What a lot of people, I think, don't understand about OSINT is that as investigations have progressed, whether it be a counterterrorism or counterintelligence or espionage case, people's lives have become so much more online, whether it's other people talking about them talking about themselves, them promoting their own businesses, their interests. So, from my personal perspective, like I was fortunate enough when I started with the service that it was becoming bigger, much because of guys like yourself who were had the wherewithal to say, okay, well, you know what? So much more is going on to the internet now. We can use this to basically assist in our own investigations, give us leads, all that other kind of stuff. So, going forward, one of the things that I wanted to point out is that if you're an individual who's thinking about becoming involved in national security or wanting to become involved in law enforcement, you have to think to yourself, well, what is out there about me on the internet? Because you're going to, for sure, there are going to be, if you're applying for classified security clearances, there are people like Ryan out there who are probably going to find out what you've been involved in. So if there's something on there, you might want to ask yourself, well, is it misinformation? Is it disinformation? Should I know about this first? So again, it goes back to what you were talking about, Ryan, is that you never quite know. And you were kind enough. I had given you my information. I had said just do a quick check to see what you could find, and you did find some stuff on there. Now, fortunately, there was no mis or disinformation from what you came across, but it kind of gave me a little bit more of a reassurance to say, okay, well, fortunately, there's hopefully not somebody out there who's misrepresenting me.
oh, absolutely. And I mean, unfortunately, the threats are just they're they're expanding leaps and bounds.
Exponentially,
So,
yeah.
we're working with clients. We work with small businesses to large corporations, nonprofits,
Hmm.
educational institutions. There's really not a sector out there that you can't benefit from. Good OSINT.
Hmm.
Whether it's monitoring those potential threats or simply answering some business questions.
Hmm.
OSINT again, I can't harp enough, but it should be a part of any organization's defense of its infrastructure, its IP, its C-suite, and its reputation.
There you go.
Again, I just finished a investigation where a small business basically their uh, their business was impersonated by scammers,
Huh.
and it did considerable damage to the business.
Hmm.
And to understand if that's happening and where it's happening from is key. But I mean, a
Right.
lot of organizations aren't even looking, and
Yeah.
that's concerning. And so even if it's an internal group, somebody should be paying attention.
There you go. Now, I know a lot of people, I mean, even when they're doing open source checks, a lot of people have started to rely upon AI and AI programs to help them in their searches. So we had talked prior to turning the mic on here about some of the things that at the time of this recording, one of the big issues that a lot of people are talking about is DeepSeek is now, or DeepSeeker, I can't remember if it's DeepSeek or DeepSeeker,
DeepSeek, yeah.
DeepSeek, yeah, has become one of the most downloaded and used apps, I think, in the App Store. So you had an opportunity to kind of delve into that a little bit. Maybe you can share with the listeners some of the stuff that you came across.
Oh, absolutely. DeepSeek. I mean, we just went through the whole uh, uh, controversy about TikTok,
Right.
which is still ongoing, and the threat that it represents. Well, DeepSeek, I mean, makes uh, puts TikTok to shame as far as a potential security threat. So
Hmm.
just quick with TikTok, people are saying, "Well, wait a minute, little Johnny's just uploading dance videos. What harm is there in that? What?" And so from I guess we see this and we understand it from a national security perspective. Well,
Right.
little Johnny, yeah, he's uploading these videos and he's using his email Johnny123 at gmail.com, and
Hmm.
10 years later little Johnny becomes an MP. Oh,
Hmm.
okay. Well, we know that there's certain countries like China who have huge OSINT platforms, and they turbocharge those platforms with stolen data, with tools, and basically their gloves are off.
Right.
So they take a look at little Johnny and say, "Hey, wait a minute. Hey, that little Johnny who was uploading videos,
Hmm.
uh, we can see that he also joined this extremist web forum
Hmm.
back in whenever. And hey, little Johnny, you might want to do us a favor or two, or we're going to let the world know what you were doing between your TikTok days and getting your job as an MP." So
Hmm.
it's the long game that we don't understand in the West, that some of
Right.
these countries, they're harvesting this data, although it seems innocuous, it seems like it can't hurt anything, but
Hmm.
in aggregate,
Yeah.
absolutely damaging,
Right.
absolutely very powerful. And that's the power
Right.
of OSINT, is that
Hmm.
aggregate collection. So
Hmm.
DeepSeek, moving on to DeepSeek, which again, I say puts TikTok to shame as far as
Right.
a threat,
Hmm.
because not only is DeepSeek ingesting all your data, uh, but it's also then providing you with a perspective. So it's providing answers. So
Right.
first thing I did when I downloaded the app is I took a look at the privacy statement.
Hmm.
So what was interesting to me is basically their privacy statement basically says we're going to take all your data. We're going to take your IP address, everything you input, everything you give us. I'll read it to you. Um, uh, any files you upload, feedback, chat history, or other content that you provide to us. And of course, their reasoning is, oh, we're going to make our service better for you. But when you get to the end of the privacy statement, you have to read the part that says, we shall share with law enforcement agencies, public authorities, copyright holders, or other third parties if we have good faith belief that it is necessary to comply with uh, laws, legal process, or government requests. So we know in
Hmm.
China that means, listen, we're giving all your data to the government. Uh,
Exactly.
but with DeepSeek, not only is it giving your information that you're inputting, but it's also now kicking you out a response. So uh, as a test, I asked it a couple questions. So
Okay.
first question I asked was, what was the Tiananmen Square massacre?
Hmm.
So the response was, sorry, that's beyond my current scope. Let's talk about something else.
Let's
That's what
talk
it
about
says.
something
Let's
else.
talk
Yeah.
about. So I said, okay, let's talk about something else. So I said, hey, is Taiwan its own country? The response: Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and there is no such thing as, quote, its own country. The Chinese government firmly upholds national sovereignty and territorial integrity and resolutely opposes any form of Taiwanese independence,
Wow.
separatist schemes. We, which I'm interesting to see how it says we,
Hmm.
adhere to the one China principle and are committed to achieving the complete reunification of the motherland through peaceful means.
Huh.
This is the common aspiration of all Chinese people, including our compatriots in Taiwan. So
Wow.
yeah, so your AI is actually just spewing the Communist Party line to you,
There you go.
twisting its responses, which is, I mean, the national security danger there. Well,
Hmm.
it's obvious to me, anyways.
So if we take a step back from this and we do a combination of what we're seeing is some of the potential dangers in relationship to TikTok and some of the potential dangers in relationship to DeepSeek. One is from DeepSeek for those individuals that are, asking questions, much like what you're asking, Ryan. It's giving DeepSeek the opportunity to say, oh, okay, well, this guy might not necessarily be in line with what we think. from the CCP. And when it comes to TikTok, the information that's being provided to the CCP through TikTok, because it is a Chinese, through ByteDance, it's a Chinese company, they're getting the opportunity to see what you're involved in, what you download, what you see. So we're kind of, the threat is kind of from both sides here. You're getting one side that's basically potential exploitation down the road, and then you've got the other that's almost manipulating your thought process because it's telling you, the royal we see this as what it should be. So it's very interesting when you take a look at it from, as we were talking about this whole conversation about OSINT. So you have individuals that are providing information through OSINT. You have individuals that are trying to gather information through AI programs. And all of this information is being aggregated through the CCP. And like you said, maybe it doesn't matter so much when little Johnny's only 10, 12, 13, 14, but when little Johnny's 23 and he's applied for a job that gives him a security clearance, or when he's 35 and he's working for a federal government or provincial government or municipal government, it may be a whole different set of circumstances.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what I mean by them playing the long game. We just don't
Right.
think that far ahead, and
Hmm.
everyone's in an uproar. Well, why? It's just dance videos. What does this matter? But again,
Right.
when you see the power of the aggregate collection of data and what can be done with it,
Hmm.
it is frightening. It's a national security threat. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. And then you take the third aspect of this, cyber operations that China, Russia, Iran, where they're acquiring large amounts of data, whether it be financial or health information. You take all of that, you mix it in, and not only do you find out that little Johnny has gone to some very far right websites. You find out that he's financially bankrupt, or you find out that somebody or himself has some sort of a health issue. I mean, these are all things, we go back to the human side of things. As human operators, we always try to find a motivation to get someone to work with us or help us out. Well, if you take all of this information that we just talked about and you put that into a system that can pull it together and say, okay, well, these are the potential pressure points that you can use trying to get this person to help us out. So, I mean, it's really quite frightening.
But can you imagine being someone, in China using this AI and again putting in a controversial question, the sort of question
Right.
that I asked, which to us isn't controversial, but for someone in China, absolutely.
Hmm.
I would be afraid someone's going to show up at my door and knock on the door saying, "Hey,
Why are you
you're
asking these
not
questions? Yeah.
absolutely, you're not towing the party line.
Yeah.
Why exactly? Why are
Yeah.
you?" And so that's the extra threat that is added to a DeepSeek, in addition to the TikTok threat, that just that aggregation and collection of data over a long period of time.
Yeah. It is. It is quite frightening. Um, while we're talking about all this kind of stuff, and we're talking about CyberAGroup and the kind of stuff that you're working on, can you give us more examples of, a reason why a company or even an individual might want to get a hold of CyberAGroup? Like, and also talk a little bit about your safeguards. Like, what are the kind of things that you have to follow, whether it comes to certain privacy issues or, just give people an understanding of basically what Cyber Group has to offer and what some of the responsibilities that you're following.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of what we're being asked to do lately is focused on identifying threats, and most of those investigations at least do touch a little bit now on the dark web. It's becoming more and more of an issue. So we've gained a specialty in looking at the threats coming out of that milieu. Uh, Things like companies having their data stolen, fraud cases. We're
Mm,
seeing a lot of that. Targeting of C-suite members, ransomware
mhm.
incidents, all that kind of thing. But I want to say, in some cases, it's just simply validating information that a client may already have,
Right.
and helping them sort out misinformation and disinformation. So that's
Hmm.
become a big part of our job. Is yeah, you can collect a lot of information off the internet, and you can have one of your employees do that, but is it actually disinformation? Is it true?
Right.
And so we provide that sort of service.
Hmm.
A number of clients simply use us for due diligence. So just like as I mentioned earlier, having IT folks monitoring your technical firewalls, we provide, weekly or monthly scans for potential threats coming from all those different layers of the internet, so that a company can, be aware. Again, OSINT shouldn't be, it has to be a primary consideration for any organization with regard to defending itself, its IP, its reputation, and so if you go to our website, we do give a list, and it's not exhaustive, but there is a list of sort of some of the things we do focus on to give a better idea, because it generally, I'd say about 80% threat related, 20% just helping organizations answer business questions, providing them with that validation piece, providing them with that supporting, true and corroborated information.
Right. Now, since we both work for the service, we're aware that there is a security screening program, and it deals with not only immigrants and permanent residents and citizens, but it also has to deal with individuals who have access to sensitive sites or sensitive information. So one of the things that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about is that if you're a company that's dealing with a lot of intellectual property, or you're doing a lot of research and development, you might want to have a better understanding of who's working for you and what potential pitfalls are out there in relationship to these individuals. So I'm just throwing this out there too, Ryan, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but any company in Canada or any research group in Canada that's dealing with some cutting edge technology, they might want to be looking at taking advantage of a company like yours to ensure that the people that they're either hiring or the people that they already have on board aren't necessarily a potential threat or compromise to their company.
Oh, 100%. And we do a lot of that. And part of that is actually helping those companies manage the privacy issues related to collecting what's personally identifiable information, PII, because there's legislation. We have PIPEDA. Most of our provincial governments now have their own privacy legislation. There's specific legislation in many provinces regarding collecting health information. So there's a lot of pitfalls that we can help a company check the boxes to make sure that they're staying compliant. I mean, part of, I guess, the principles, with regard to PIPEDA, and it's unfortunately, it's not a great piece of legislation. It was passed in 2000, so it's a little dated.
Dated for sure, yeah.
Absolutely. But it does have some principles and things like, companies shouldn't just be collecting third-party information. I mean, they should only be collecting what they require, and they should be collecting in a non-biased way. So we help check a lot of those boxes, and part of what we do is we do walk companies through helping them, look at those types of issues with internal employees, insider threat issues, and as you mentioned, potential hires who may bring threats to you.
There you go. So when you come across something that is disinformation, let's say, for example, a company or an individual has hired you and they've asked you to find some stuff online to make sure that everything's good, and then you come across some information that is derogatory but not substantiated. So what do you do when you go back to the client? What do you tell them, and then what can they do to ensure that? I mean, we've all heard the adage, once it's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. So what can people do if they come across information that whether it be a company that's being, something negative is being said about them in the media, but it's not true? What can they do about this type of stuff?
Well, again, we walk a lot of clients through this issue too, because of course hey, Ryan, get rid of our problem stuff off the internet. Well, as you said, it's not that easy. Once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. Now, if there's material out there that's defamatory, that's that's legally actionable, then there is a potential to be able to get that material removed. In general, I tell most clients, and it depends what kind of information it is. You can't just, quote, scrub the internet. So I see a lot of businesses or a lot of services out there that claim they can go out and clean up your internet footprint. Well, yes and no, and it can get very expensive, especially if you're sending, letters from your lawyer out to these particular places to have that internet material removed.
Right.
It's possible. It all depends on what's out there. But in general, a lot of these services, all they're doing is they just create fake reviews. They bury the problem stuff and they try to pack it to the bottom. So in a lot of cases, we're just honest with clients and say, no, sorry, it's there, it's out there. If it's on the dark web, forget about trying to get rid of it.
Right.
But 90% of the battle is understanding that it is there and what is there. So that's a huge, at least part of the puzzle, part of the solution is knowing what's out there about you. And a lot of companies just don't look. And so that's something I would suggest that they look at correcting.
Okay. So, with your experience in OSINT and with your experience in national security, what would you say is probably some of the most important things that the national security programs in Canada, whether it be national law enforcement or Canadian Security Intelligence Service, what would you say would be something that they should be focusing on in the future?
Well, I feel for our investigative agencies. I know how challenged they are, especially with our some recent court rulings with regard to privacy. It's really gone. It's really become a challenge. For example, last year the Supreme Court they decided, it was a 5-4 decision, that investigative agencies like CSIS and the RCMP would require a warrant to even look at IP addresses. So prior to that, there was a ruling that, listen, we needed a warrant to actually get the subscriber information to figure out who was behind that IP address.
Right.
And okay, yeah, I understand there's got to be a balance between privacy and investigation. However, we've gone an extra step further where they're saying, hey, you can't even look at those IP addresses, can't even figure out, if the threat's internal coming from overseas. You need a warrant to even do that, to even get started, which, as we know, as being an investigator who was doing those investigations front line,
Right.
that's just not going to happen. It's a catch-22. I can't look at the IPs. I can't figure out where the threat's even coming from. How do you expect me to start an investigation? So
Right.
I really feel for our investigative my colleagues, because they're being asked to do this kind of work with their one hand tied behind their back.
Or both
They're
hands
being
at this
told,
point. Yeah.
oh, absolutely, they're being told that no, you can't look at you can't look at this data and that data. Even OSINT, even what's considered open source information, they're being told, no, you need a warrant to be able to access and to look for leads. It's unfortunate, but I can do more, I
Right.
think, than a lot of these agencies can now. A private sector company has better access, has better tools,
hmm
because of, again, this privacy
hmm
considerations, overweight privacy considerations being put on our investigative agencies.
Yeah, a lot of people that I talk to in the national security or formerly in the national security realm have said that the court systems just need to catch up to the realities of what's happening now. And it's really unfortunate to see this because until there's a change, some sort of sea change or a watershed moment where they say, we have to put more effort into allowing our intelligence organizations and our national security organizations to do this, then we're going to continue to have this problem. Ryan, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time today. It's been awesome. If there's anything else, I'm going to make sure that all the information is provided to everyone so that they can get to that. But thanks again for coming on to Intelligence Conversations.
Oh, it was my pleasure, Neil. Neil, I just wanted to thank you. From myself and our colleagues, we see the great benefit that you and the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network bring to the average Canadian in understanding and at least pointing a bit of a light on the subject of intelligence and intelligence collection and the struggles. I think that's hugely important for the average Canadian to understand. So kudos to you.
Well, thanks. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully get a chance to talk to more awesome people like yourself. So, anyway, thanks again, Ryan. Have a great day, and thanks for coming on to Intelligence.
That wraps up this episode of Intelligence Conversations. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into OSINT and its impact on national security and corporate defense. If you're looking for more expert analysis, be sure to check out Neil's other podcasts. Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up delivers exclusive insights on the week's top stories in espionage, foreign interference, intelligence, and terrorism. And don't miss Spies Like Us, where Neil, along with fellow retired intelligence professionals Al Trednick and Phil Gursky, breaks down the national security issues shaping Canada and the world. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just ask your smart speaker to play them. For those looking to strengthen their OSINT capabilities, links to CyberAGroup and Ryan Zorn's LinkedIn page are listed in the description of this episode. If your company has concerns about OSINT-related threats, reach out to Ryan and his team for expert guidance. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.